What's up, y'all? Back again with another video, and as you can tell because of the title, I'm talking about the Wonder Man show today. Now, if you already seen my reel about this show, then you know how I feel about this show very deeply and my personal thoughts on it. So I won't go too much. I won't, say it again, but I will go into a deeper understanding later on. But first, I want to talk about some of the different changes between Simon Williams in the MCU and Simon Williams in the comics. So like power sets, his origin, different characters, that kind of surround him, that are important to his character, and just stuff like that. So starting off with his powers, per se, we don't really see his powers per se in the show, not as pronounced as you would see him in the comics. The most we kind of get is like super like enhanced strength, or I wouldn't say enhanced because well, we don't really know how he gained these abilities, but again, I'll go more into that later. But he has like super strength, maybe enhanced speed, definitely has heightened reflexes, flight, kind of the normal shebang. But that's the most we see, right? Because Simon Williams' powers they aren't showcased as much in the or in the show as they are in the comics. But I think that's a good thing, and it's definitely for a reason, as it is pertaining to the show. The next thing I want to talk about is different characters. So mainly when I talk about characters, I'm talking about Eric Williams' brother, because if you know Eric Williams from the comics, in the comics he's the Grim Reaper, and he's not that in the show. Which honestly, I didn't. I don't. Honestly, I don't know too much about the Grim Reaper, but he isn't a very prominent character. Um, I would say even in the comics, he really isn't in the show, but I don't think he is even more in the comics. I can't think of a recent comic he was in. I could be wrong, right? I can't read every comic on the on the face of the earth, but as far as I'm aware from research, I'm really not really sure. I'm not really sure what recent comic he's appeared in. But yet in the comics, Eric does become the Grim Reaper, and they do form a pretty heated and strong rivalry because, of course, these dudes are brothers, right? But in the show, it's not like that. Like, yes, they do argue and stuff, and Eric is low key kind of a dick, right? I mean, they try to paint him out. They try to paint Simon out in the last couple episodes of him being a dick. Yeah, if anyone's a dick in the show, it's definitely Eric. Um, but yeah, I didn't really catch or see any like alluding to Eric eventually becoming the Grim Reaper per se, but who know, you never know. Maybe we get a season 2 and something happens and then boom bam boom we got the Grim Reaper. But it's not something that like I definitely need to happen. It would be really really cool since now at the end of the show they kind of resolved, and now Eric's really proud of him, and everything's said and done, right? Everything's good and calm for the time being. But it doesn't look like they're gonna go that route with Eric, and I wouldn't be mad if they didn't, because in all honesty, I kind of like Eric's character the way he is. I'm perfectly fine with that. But if they do decide to go the route with the Grim Reaper, then sure, by all means, why not? Um, Other characters, his dad died honestly, not kind of early on in his life in the comics, but wasn't there prominently at all. But his dad is a big driving force for what for how Williams does turn out in the future. So I think he was used pretty well. His mom, honestly, I don't think his mom's talked about in the comics either, but she's not as important to the show as it is overall, compared to comics or not. But yeah, those are different characters and stuff that are kind of tied to him that are kind of prominent in this case. The next thing I want to talk about is the setup for the West Coast Avengers. Okay, so as some of you might know, Simon Williams is one of the founding members of the West Coast Avengers. He was on that original team, and I think is still on the reoccurring iterations and versions of the team. Now, on that original team, when I made my first video about the show, like before it came out, I think I missed a couple of characters. So the original members on that original team was, of course, Simon Williams, Wonder Man, Tigra, War Machine, and Iron Man. I thought it was just Iron Man, but it was War Machine as well. Mockingbird. I think Jessica Drew Spider-Woman was on there, but I can't remember if she was on the original version or a later version. But I think she may have been on the original. Hawkeye, I almost said Hawkbird for some reason. Hawkeye was on that original team. Uh, I can't remember if Ant-Man. I don't think Ant-Man was on there. There were some other people, but yeah. So as for like setups for the West Coast Avengers, not much. Kind of making sense when, I mean, when I really think about it, this show was very secluded. Like there were definitely points during the show where I honestly forgot this was a Marvel show. And I'm not saying it as like a bad thing. I kind of almost see it as a good thing, sort of. Because I don't know. I feel like if it can really if it can really take you like out of like its universe and make it feel like that this could happen, someone is going through this in the real world, which obviously people do. I don't know. I feel like the show is kind of doing its job. But there were points where I kind of did forget because the show is very secluded, right? I mean, even up to like the opening scene in the show, like honestly kind of forgot until I saw the Rogers sign in the beginning of the show. But yeah, for setups, there's not really a lot. Now there are other members of the West Coast Avengers who were on the original team in the comics that are in the MCU already, but these characters have yet to interact, right? But I think we definitely will get that set up eventually come Vision Quest because from the reports I've seen, Wonder Man is set to return in the Vision Quest show and be, I think, a prominent character in that show, not just kind of a cameo. But yeah, I think they definitely might be alluding to setting it up. There actually is another team too that they're definitely or not definitely, but maybe alluding to setting up, and that is the Great Lakes Avengers, which you probably don't know who the hell that is. I mean, in all honesty, they're very obscure. And like you mention that to somebody, they're probably gonna laugh at you. Like the Great Lakes Avengers, what the hell is that? Okay, so the Great Lakes Avengers is I want to say they are on a team of mutants, even though there is one member on the team that is a mutant, and his name's Doorman. Now he does appear in the show. He does appear in the show. His real name is Damar Davis. He's a mutant. He was born with, of course, the X gene, and his mutant ability is to open up doorways, as his name suggests, that open up to the Dark Force dimension. Now, real quick a little side story on his, or a little side note on his character. Like I said in the comics, he opens up portals to the Dark Force dimension, like Cloak. But in the show, Damar Davis's character, of course, works at a bar, or not a bar, a nightclub in LA, and he goes out to throw the trash. He goes out to throw the trash out in the back. Goes to this dumpster, which has the name Roxxon on the side of it, or on the front. Wink, wink at that. If you notice all the other Roxxon little cameos here and there, they're definitely probably building up to something. But there's this goo like oozing out of the trash bin, and like any other reasonable person in the Marvel universe, he reaches his hand down and touches the goo and gets transported into like this dreamlike place, and he's surrounded by all these doors. Falls down screaming and wakes up in his apartment. Then of course he calls his dog over. Realizes once he calls his dog over and his dog goes through his chest that something's wrong. Then of course he goes to find his dog, and that's when he realizes there's something going on, right? The whole saving the people from the fire. So it's different from the comics. When I know that probably definitely has a lot of people theorizing, like what does it have to do with Roxxon? What was Roxxon doing? All sorts of stuff. Ties and connections to Dagger, since or not Dagger, to Cloak, since him and Cloak do share the same power source in the comics, but it's a little bit different since Cloak isn't a mutant, but not Dagger, but Doorman is, right? But I mentioned Doorman because Doorman is, like I said, a part of the Great Lakes Avengers. And the Great Lakes Avengers, they consist of Doorman, Flatman, I think it's Big Bertha, I think. Yes, it is Big Bertha. It's not Big Barda because Big Barda is a DC character. Big Bertha, and then Mystery Immortal. Now, Mystery Immortal we've already seen in the MCU. We saw him in the She-Hulk show, but he was pretty much nothing like his comic book or his comic book counterpart. So even if you knew who Mystery Immortal was, like myself, you definitely wouldn't be able to tell. I didn't know that was Mystery Immortal until, like I think I watched a video about that episode, and then they were talking about, oh, this is Mystery Immortal. I was like, that's supposed to be Mystery Immortal, and he just caught me off guard because he was like, what was he like? Some older dude who was trying to like divorce his wife, but he couldn't for some reason, so he kept trying to kill himself. But he's Mystery Immortal, so it didn't quite work out. I don't know. It was weird. The She-Hulk show was not my cup of tea. That's all I'm gonna say. Definitely somebody else's, but not mine. So that's two members already in the MCU who are members of the Great Lakes Avengers in the comics. So will we see them? I don't know. Maybe not. But it might be cool to see him. Um, Now, with that out of the way, I want to talk about Simon Williams and his character at hand. So we see Simon Williams in the show as a struggling actor, right? Um, like his homegirl said, you can't even lay in a pool of blood, right, and act dead. You got to just keep talking and trying to change this and change that, and eventually it gets on the producer's nerves, and they're like, we got to get rid of this guy. We can't keep him alone. You can't keep him, on the show. This is all he's gonna do, right? So we see him get fired. He returns to his apartment, right? Then not only does he suffer one whammy, but a double whammy. His girl's moving out, and he's like, you're moving out. And she's like, oh, you're supposed to be still working. Basically trying to move out without him knowing, right? And he's like, oh, so you're just trying to sneak out, right? She leaves. He sits down. He's getting all angry and stuff, and then we see his eyes glow. Everything's shaking around him, and then it cuts over to a shot of his outside house, and then boom, a big shockwave of like energy, or not energy, but like a big shockwave just comes and shoots out of the apartment, right? Obviously, first showing us that his powers are unstable, and when I mean unstable, I don't mean like the raw like power energy that they have can like destroy stuff, which ionic energy definitely can. When I mean unstable, uncontrollable, is that Williams doesn't pay mind to his powers. He never really has. Ever since the whole fire incident they talk about when he was what, like 9 or 10, that happened, he's never really cared for his powers. He's felt that they've always made him different. But his powers are not the only thing that make him different, though. Williams as a character is very different. Powers or no powers. It's very adamant that even before the onset of his powers, he's always kind of been this, self secluded, kind of on my own kid, right? It seems like he's always been picked on. Then the onset of his powers, now it's even worse because now he has to try to hide this thing. And even worse in the future, he has to hide it because he can't be, an actor in Hollywood with having powers. And of course, we learned that in the show comes from Damar Davis, Doorman, when Josh Gad, of course, got sucked up out of reality. I'm going to call it Dark Force because that's what it's called in the comics. Out of the Dark Force dimension that is accessible through Willie Damar Davis himself, right? And of course, it went on to be called the Doorman Clause, which is why no actor or actress who has powers can perform, and be an actor in any sort of thing, right? So when you look at him like that, you look at somebody like that who's already kind of, on their own, off to the side type person, then they get into something they want to do, but they can't do it because of a certain reason, and they try to hide it. It makes it all the more stressful. And that leads you back to what I was saying about his powers being uncontrolled. Since he wants to do what he wants to do, but if he leans into the whole him having powers thing, then he can't do it. Then there's no reason for him to even bother with looking at his power sets. No reason to learn how to harness them. No reason to see, hey, what can I do? Can I do this? Can I do that? No reason. Because he doesn't want to acknowledge them. Because if he does, then that means the total annihilation or destruction of his entire career, which already at the start of the show is pretty much nothing, non-existent. And of course, we see that in the progression of the show. Once he gets the role of Wonder Man, like it's a huge, huge fear because he's gotten this once in a lifetime, or not once in a lifetime, but his, what he didn't know what he really what he really needed, which was the Wonder Man role. And if his powers, are shown off to the world, it's over for him. He's done so, right? So, since he has no onset control, when he's trying to like, hold back his abilities, he closes his eyes, he breathes, right? Because he has no other way to do that because he doesn't try to utilize them in any sort of way. So there's no real way for him to even try to really calm himself down besides just, real quick breathing exercises because, ionic energy is a very powerful thing, especially when it comes to Simon Williams. So I think that was really cool to see that, he has literally no inherent control over his abilities. Once he becomes kind of unstable, he becomes unstable. Another good example is when he's at his mom's party and his brother is being an absolute dick to him and saying all these hateful things. Like it's insane, bro. And then he just kind of loses his shit and like just throws his hands on his mom's new what do they call it? His mom's new counter and just destroys it, right? And then the funny thing is the only thing his brother can say to him is, like, what the hell is wrong with you, man? That's all he could say. After saying all he said, that's all he could say was, "What the hell is wrong with you?" Right? Williams is such a sad character. Such a sad character. His own brother always tries to chastise him and put him in a light of, he's lazy, doesn't try to do anything for himself, stealing money from his mom and stuff, just all this hateful shit. Instead of just trying to uplift his brother, knowing that he has his abilities that he didn't ask for, right? Trying to pursue a career that he wants, but then again, it's being held back by something again he did not ask for. And I think that really shows you too, how many people in the Marvel universe have powers that don't even want them, right? Aside from like acting, how many people have powers and like if people were to find out that they got these powers, they'd be screwed for life. People always think like, damn, if I was somebody in the Marvel universe and I got powers, I'd be a hero or whatever. I'd be doing this, I'd be doing that. But we never think about the side effects of what these powers bring. Not like radiation poisoning or this or that or whatever. You never think about it in the point of view of I just don't want them. They don't bring you in any inherent like disfigurement or anything. You just don't want them because what you're trying to do in life will be absolutely hindered by these onset powers, right? And I think that's the most damning thing about William's character is that there's literally nothing he can do about it, but he tries so hard to try to hide them. But it seems like at every other turn, they're always being manifested, or his character at hand, even excluding his powers, is being tested. And I think that character dive within of itself is one of the best ones I've ever seen, especially from a Marvel project. I think it was brilliant the way they showcased that. Like that scene with him and Trevor outside of Kovac's house, chef's kiss, beautiful scene. I love that. Another scene was when they were at forget the actor's name. They were at what's his name's house, and he's talking to William, and he's like, acting, it's just a job. You try to get anything else out of it, it's when you fail. And then Trevor's just, appalled because to Trevor, acting is so much more, and that's exactly what he tells him before he leaves. Acting is not just a job; it's a calling. One of the most beautiful things someone could ever do with their lives, right? And then, of course, Simon sticks up for his friend. He's like, well, I gotta hear his shit, Trevor. Let's get out of here, right? And he comes over his own self and is like, you know what? I got a place where we can record the self tapes. And he goes to his house, right? And of course, that leads to Trevor finding out about his, his predicament, right? So I say all that to say that I just really love Simon's character, and I love the character dive that they give Simon in this show to show you that, in a way, powers aren't always what you perceive to think that they are. For everybody, having superpowers is not going to be a blessing. It's going to be a curse. And sometimes it's always going to be a curse. Now, at the end, Simon does kind of learn to live with his powers and live with what he has, right? He sacrifices, getting caught with having powers and being a wide-known actor because of the Wonder Man movie when he breaks Simon out of his cell at the Supermax prison at the end of the show. But I just think that this was a beautiful show, and just his character in general was just like awesome. And I loved him and Trevor. I love their duo. I need to see more of them. I just love it, man. And I love how secluded it feels. I feel like not a lot of Marvel shows feel very like, like everything like it's right here and everything else is like over there. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. Like there's always some type of like hint, like cameo for this, cameo for that, hints for this, hints for that, And they do definitely have those, with like the Rogers banner that we see in Hollywood, because, we also saw that in Spider-Man No Way Home. We saw that in Daredevil Born Again Season 2, and of course the Hawkeye show, which is when it first appeared. Stuff like that. They bring up Captain America and different things, because, they're still in the Marvel Universe, right? People are going to talk, but I still do like that, like they strive for that, let's make this feel like its own thing, right? It felt like Simon was the only character in all and in the Marvel universe entirety. Like I feel like nothing else mattered but Simon. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know. I just thought that was such a beautiful thing for this show, and that's why I have so much love for the show, and I want to see more of him. There's already rumors now talking about he's going to be in Doomsday, but let's be realistic. It's probably not going to happen. There hasn't been any sort of build up, or not build up, any sort of any like leaks or not even promo for anything for him being in there. Speaking of Doomsday, though there is no kind of build up for Doomsday, like no like little post credit scene or anything. Somebody recruiting him or something alluding to something going on that would happen in Doomsday. And I thought that was good too. I definitely thought like we definitely don't need that, especially since Williams is probably not going to be in Doomsday. So I was perfectly fine with that. But yeah, that was the biggest thing I want to talk about was just Simon's character in general and what I thought about his character. And yeah, man, I loved it, bro. That's all I gotta say. And if you guys, like what I have to say about this show, you guys should definitely give it a shot. Even if you don't, just still give it a shot. You never know. My words don't have to change with how you feel about a show that you may not watch. If you don't want to watch it, don't want to watch it. But that's all I got for you guys today. There'll definitely be another video coming today. I definitely do want to do my Daredevil Born Again Season 2 video later on today, most likely. And I also want to do a review for a new figure I got because yesterday I found um my first Kabaticon, which are the which are the combiners that form, or not combiners, which are the bots that form together to form Bruticus. So yeah, hopefully I find them soon and I don't have terrible luck like I do with the Aerobots right now. But yeah, more on that when I do my review video for Blastoff, which is the character I found. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments or whatever, more videos you'd like to see me do, things I can work on, because I am still a upcoming content creator. I do want to hear feedback from you guys, just feedback from anybody. I do want to hear that, to try to improve myself in the craft and the skill, because like, I've said before, this is more of a for me thing, right? Like, I guess I've had a handful of people tell me like, hey, you should definitely try this, try that. You should do videos, you should do reviews. And, I fed into it and, here I am. But, and like I said, this is for me, for myself, because, not everybody in my family, likes the stuff I like. So, it's a nice place, to kind of talk to the camera and get out stuff that I like. But also, it'd be nice if people find enjoyment in my videos and, they learn something new. But, yeah, I'm going to get out of here now. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.